Hi, and welcome to Neuromoms Podcast. Lights on. Today, we have some special guests with us. We have our daughters, Sadie and
my daughter, Olivia. I'm Erin, and I'm with my co-host, Amanda. We are the founders of Neuromoms Collective. And today's conversation is going to be about the siblings of TBI survivors and the experiences that they have, in some ways a little bit easier, and in some ways they've got challenges that are not experienced by the TBI survivor or the family. They're here to tell us about the things that went well and the things that they wish we had known in the beginning so that we could be more supportive to them.
Yeah, and in our situation, it was a little different. We kind of talked about in previous episodes, and when Mackenzie was on, Mackenzie and Sadie were both in the car accident. Mackenzie was driving, and she was 17. Sadie was 9 years old and a passenger. Different experiences being a sibling in that situation compared to just being the person that's at home when there is a TBI situation. So, Sadie, we usually start our episodes with taking a deep breath. So this would be a good time, I think, to go ahead and let's just take a deep breath and get ready to have some conversation. We always want our podcast to be real conversations, and we want Olivia and Sadie to feel comfortable to share their experience from their perspective and help others learn from the things they've gone through, maybe offer some information or some support to others that are going through it. Sadie, as we're thinking about 9-year-old Sadie, a conversation we've had in the past, what are some of those things you remember from those initial times? What are some of those things you wish those caregiver adults would have understood or been able to offer you during those times?
I feel like everyone kind of downplayed the fact that I was in the accident and that I did walk away without severe injuries as my sister. A lot of people just chalked it up as, oh, she's fine. I remember going right back to school, starting my normal life again, not like a couple days after I got home from the hospital. And I remember being super anxious every day, but that wasn't something that we had ever really talked about in our family. It was just kind of chalked up as, oh, she's just nervous about cars. She's just nervous because of the accident. And I wish at the time we had more knowledge about what was going on and got me help sooner rather than, I think I didn't start therapy until like a year later.
You started therapy that fall, but
I don't remember.
It could, I mean, again, time stands still when we're going through these pretty significant things. So yeah, thinking back on it, definitely was a difference in injuries. And I think we've often talked about too, you had injuries that people couldn't see, whereas Mackenzie had injuries that people could see and couldn't see.
Yeah.
So making sure people understood that part of it is something you want people to understand. And I think it's that mental health piece that we don't always talk enough about and acknowledge enough. In our situation, we were so thankful that Sadie did walk away, that it was like, you know, she's not in ICU, check. Moving on to the next one. Is the next one going to make it? And it's really one of those things as a parent to be able to stop and pause and think, okay, how do we meet the needs of all of these different individuals when we have these traumatic situations going on?
Amanda, we talked in previous episodes about having a project manager, somebody who steps in who's not the immediate caregiver. So not you or Trav or me or Carl, but to have another person, an aunt or an uncle or a friend or whoever, can step back and say, okay, Mackenzie was in the accident. There are other children at home still. Sadie was in the accident, and have somebody else who can see the forest through the trees. We were so in it that if you have to choose between keeping this child alive and tending to this child's emotional recovery, you have to prioritize that. Of course, keeping the child alive. But what would be better is if you could do both. And you can't as the caregiver. So having another trusted adult stepping in, I think would be really
Yeah,
helpful.
so crucial during those times. And, I was of the philosophy of like, hey, let's try to get as much normal back into her life as we can. Let's get her to school, because her teacher, Mrs.
Really?
Love her, was just that mom at school. And I knew that she was that trusted person that would take care of Sadie every day from 8 to 3. I knew that she would be nurturing and loving and caring, not just having Sadie sitting idle at home.
Yeah.
So it's thinking about some of those pieces. I wanted you to be surrounded by people who would love you and support you.
I mean, this is no fault of my mother, because we never experienced anything like that before. Everything was happening so fast. I was going back to school. Ethan went back to school. Dad was still working at the farm. Mom was up at the hospital. I felt like everything was moving around me, but I was frozen because I didn't know what to do. Looking back now, it's going to be 10 years in April.
I know.
Holy cow. It just baffles me that at 9 years old, I was feeling all these emotions that now I can manage and now I can deal with, and have really great resources that I have found. But I just didn't know about any of those. At school, I would have breakdowns in class and I'd have to go sit in the teacher's lounge for 45 minutes. And I thought that was super normal. And as I've gotten older and realized that, like, no, you were a hurting 9-year-old child who went through a very traumatic experience. I've had to learn to be softer on my parents, myself, and my sister about the entire situation, because it wasn't fair for anyone.
I think that's definitely a good way to put it. It isn't fair, and we're dealt these situations that nobody asks for. As parents, especially our 9-year-old little girl hurting, nobody ever wants that. We want to just swoop in and rescue her and take care of her and make everything better. For that, I have to say that my little glimmer there was Mrs. Whaley, who loved on you and cared for you and protected you at school in such a special and unique way.
Yeah.
And just even the other people in the community. We've talked other episodes about community members and how they come around, are like family, and help support and take care of. We were blessed with that too.
A 9-year-old is a child, but I remember at 9 years old feeling like a little adult. When I was turning 10, I just remember being like, now I've arrived. Now I'm a grown up. Back in our generation, you were babysitting at 9 and 10 years old, little human babies, so you were supposed to be this grown up in a bunch of ways, but you are a child. We've talked about this a little bit, Sadie, you and I, and your mom and I, that you put expectations on yourself that belong to a grown up, and you were a child.
Yeah.
To have an expectation of yourself that you should have been able to deliver in a different way, you were just a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I felt so guilty for so many years, because in my mind, I could have done so much more to be there for my mom, support my dad, help out my siblings. It has taken me many years of therapy to realize I was 9. Like, I was 9 years old trying to do stuff that I don't even know if 19-year-old me could do it. Like, some of the stuff that I was taking on, I don't think I could mentally do any of that now. And I was trying to do it 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. It just blows my mind that I thought it was normal. I thought all those feelings were normal. I thought the guilt that I just lived with every single day was normal. And it wasn't. That is something that definitely I've had to be a little softer with myself on, because I do tend to still feel that guilt about a lot of things. It has just carried throughout my life, and it's something that I've had to learn to be softer with myself on, especially my parents, because I held so much anger towards them for so many years because of the whole accident, and because I felt abandoned, and it's taken a lot of work, but it was never their fault, and no one would wish any of the pain that we all went through on anyone.
I think when you talk about those injured siblings, that feeling of abandonment, whether you're in the car like Sadie was, or a child at home and just not in the hustle and bustle. And I don't know, Olivia, your situation's a little different with where you were in your age, but that feeling of being abandoned is real. And I think that can be at any age. Life was rolling in a certain way. We had an ebb and flow, and then everything halts. When Sadie says she's sitting still and life is moving around her, we kind of felt the same way. I felt trapped in a hospital and life was moving on around us. But definitely, I think those feelings of, abandonment can be felt by a lot of children.
Olivia was 22 and living in DC when Dallas had his AVM rupture, and he was stationed in Biloxi, Mississippi. So they weren't near each other, and he was rather quickly taken to Arizona, which, fun fact, Olivia cannot be in Arizona because the air literally is deadly to Olivia. She got an infection when she was living there called valley fever, and if she's in the Southwest where they have cactus, it can literally kill her. So she couldn't even come visit her best friend and brother for 2 months.
Yeah.
And the day before this happened, she had a major life change. She was moving somewhat unexpectedly, and we were all there to help. And we were like, we got you, girl. We'll fly out to DC. We'll help you. We're all here, all hands on deck. And then like 14 hours later, we were like, okay, well, I can't parent. I can't do anything for a long time. And then you had a new job. That was a huge time in your life when you should have had the kind of parents that you do have. We should have been there helping you move, doing all that. And we were just physically and emotionally gone.
Yeah.
Was it a delight?
Dallas and I are obviously step siblings. When we were younger, there was a lot of talking about fairness. What's fair for Dallas? What's fair for me? And I feel like we would always talk about like fairness isn't like 50-50, right? It's like what you need at the time. And so I feel like I definitely took that with me growing up with Dallas and you guys, and just understanding that Dallas needs this time right now. But yeah, it was hard not having you guys visit sometimes and feeling a little distance. And I felt guilty too, just because I felt like I couldn't go to Arizona. I felt like I didn't know, things were happening so fast, and there was like updates day by day. And I felt like I didn't really feel like I had the capacity to kind of check in all the time. And I kind of felt like, am I being a bad sister? Am I being a bad family member if I'm not like up to date on everything and checking in? So definitely having that distance was difficult.
Yeah. It's like, it makes me flush because it makes me so sad for baby Olivia. I mean, I know baby Olivia was 22, but she just is still a baby. It's just so unfair, and there's no way to do it right. The situation is so bad that there's no choice that anybody could have made that would have been the right choice, because they were all bad choices. Yeah. One day Olivia was really, an apartment fell through and things were just super chaotic, and like it was a really bad situation. And I remember I just literally Venmoed you money and was like, stay in a hotel tonight because I cannot help you more. This is not the kind of parents that we are. My kids are struggling. I'm on a plane. I'm on my way. And I felt so bad. I adopted Olivia a long time ago, a very long time ago. And one thing that I think about as an adoptive parent is, and Dallas is my biological child, I've always been very aware that socially people can view those relationships different, that socially people often think that you can't love your children equally. I'm so grateful to have this experience because I'm like, yeah, you can, and it's awesome. But I'm also aware that if I am removed from Olivia's life quickly, the optics of that to her, to everyone else, to myself, are that somehow I'm not loving my children equally, even though equal isn't always fair. Dallas needed that more in that moment, but it was so sad.
Yeah. And I definitely felt your awareness to, like, I don't want Olivia to feel abandoned. And so I felt like something that I was doing and was maybe a disservice to myself was kind of creating that normalcy for the family, like just kind of trying to live my best life, but also not grieving the process, I think.
There was an interesting thing that Olivia and I tell each other everything for good or for ill. And there was a couple weeks where she was being kind of surly and kind of cagey. I was like, what are you up to this weekend? Nothing. You're always up to something. And you were just not telling me things, but it was obvious because you're a terrible liar. And you were like, oh, nothing. I finally was like, what is happening? And I pulled it out of her that she had started dating somebody, but she didn't want her happiness to feel, I think, based on those conversations, if I remember right, you didn't want it to sound like you were saying, hey, yeah, whatever happened with Dallas, but guess what? I'm falling in love. Like, you didn't want to center yourself, but if we don't have joy, what are we fighting for? You know, we're fighting for this good life. But what an awkward position to be in. Like, you're falling in love. He's the greatest. You know, you're totally falling in love with Jack, and that should be conversations that you and I are like, oh my God. And instead I'm like, great, good luck, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, gosh, friends, we are going to pause right here. This has been a really interesting, really powerful conversation. We also recognize that it's a pretty heavy one. So we're going to take a pause at this point, celebrating where we've come with the kids and how well they're doing, and make room for the next half of the conversation to really be the healing and the growth and all of the things that are necessary to move forward with your life when you're trying to recover from something as awful as a traumatic brain injury to a loved one. So stick with us for part 2. It'll be out next week. We appreciate you.